Hey there, my sister, my friend. Welcome to the Dr. Tanya B podcast with me, Dr. Tanya B. I am here to help you be your best, most authentic self, your life, your way. We're going to talk everything self-care, self-love, mindset, and personal growth with a splash of hippie woo. I am proud of you for giving yourself this time today, so let's not waste time and let's dig in. All right. So with me, I'm going to say tonight because it is, as we're recording this, it's the beginning of April. It will launch in a couple of weeks. But as we are recording, it is a cold, rainy evening in central Pennsylvania. And so my guest and I are both from the same area and sort of suffering from the same thing. So this evening, I have with me Becca Haupt Aldredge, who is sort of has an interesting path similar to mine in terms of we both work in higher ed. And then also is doing something really fascinating in how we got connected. She is the owner of the Happy and Healthy Wellness. I almost said happy and wealthy. It's Happy and Healthy Wellness Studio, but I hope you're wealthy too. And so we got connected in terms of teaching a class, and we'll talk about that here at some point. And then we have a book that we're going to chat about, which I'm really excited. So for those of you watching, the book is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel Vander Kolk, not Kirk, Kolk. And so I think this will be a really fun conversation. And I think that when you think about what this book is, what it means, what it's talking about, the impact for both Becca and I is pretty significant in terms of the work that we're doing. So Becca, hi. It's great to have you tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
Happy to
we're
be
really
here.
happy. Yeah, I'm so happy that you're here. I love that we got connected and we have so many similarities. So why don't we just start out with you telling us who you are, how you got to where you're at, and what you're doing.
Sure. Yeah. So I wear a lot of hats. I think space holder is like one of the biggest kind of connective tissue pieces between what I do. But like you said, I also work in higher education and have had a career there inspired by my own really great experiences as a college student. Um, I live in a great college town, and being a part of that college town community, supporting students and bumping into colleagues and faculty, whether it's here on campus or out in the community, um, just has created this like really tight knit kind of ecosystem of people that care about each other and care about the work and care about supporting students. And I was really fortunate that when I first, moved to where I live now, I got connected with our local yoga studio. I immediately found a home there and a home base there. I lived right around the corner, and it was fabulous. A couple of years ago, just after COVID, there was an opportunity for the studio to change hands. And at that time, I was open to receiving. And I had the privilege of stepping in as the new owner of the space. I call myself the chief space holder. I also call myself the lady who pays the bills. The studio would not exist without, we have dozens of incredibly talented teachers, of which you are now part of that journey and part of that story. But we have brought in practitioners from all over the region, yoga teachers, embodiment facilitators, sound bath healers, right? Any kind of healing modality, we're wanting to bring it to our area and to our community. We're primarily a yoga studio. We do a little bit of Pilates and some other things too, but we've cultivated this really neat space that we get to hold for people to show up as their whole and authentic selves, and really support them through whatever life looks like. And so we support the students, faculty, and staff in our community in our small college town.
I love it. And having been in a space, it is one of the most comfortable and welcoming environments that I think I've ever taught in. And so I absolutely encourage people to check out. I will make sure that the link to the studio is in the notes. So we'll make sure that everybody gets that. All right. So let's dive in a little bit and talk about the book. So The Body Keeps the Score. And I think just the title of this book says a lot, right? The body is there's some stuff going on there. So why don't you just talk about and also one of the things I wanted to talk about was, so you have this oh, I'm going to back up for a second. Got very excited. So this conversation started because when you and I met and connected, one of the things you shared is that you have been thinking about creating a book club, and this was the book that you were thinking about starting with, and it sort of led me down a path of let's have this conversation. because I think it's really important and relevant to so many people. But one of the things that we also talked about is that it's a struggle to get people to commit to this sort of thing. And so we love the book, we're reading the book, we're listening to the book, we're talking about the book, but we won't commit to a book club to talk about the book or to make sure that we're informing these things. So just tell me about your experience a little bit about, like, how did you get to the point of wanting to create a book club? What has the struggle been in trying to get people to commit to that?
Yeah, we're a studio that takes suggestions and input from our community, and I really work behind the scenes to try to make it happen. And I think it was well over a year ago that one of our community members asked, okay, could we potentially put together a book club? One of the unique things about what we've put together is we're one of the most flexible book clubs you will ever find. I think one of the big barriers people find is these book clubs have these commitments that, like, we meet every month on Tuesday and you have to read the book, or you feel like you have to, or you feel like you have to read the book. And what if you don't like the book, and all of those things? And so the book club, the space that we created, is opt in on the months that you're interested in the book and opt out on the months that you're not interested. It's pay what you wish. It's a contribution to the studio. So no financial barrier. If you don't have something to contribute, that's okay. I try really hard to stock the book on our free lending library that we have at the studio. So if someone needs to borrow a copy, and then you don't have to finish the book. Just come. Right. If you're interested in the topic, if you've read the background, if you listened to the first chapter but had every intention of finishing it but didn't, just come, right? Just come to talk about it. And what is neat is, despite all of those factors, right, there are still people who, I think the idea of signing up for a book club when we're all too busy, no one has time to leisurely sit around and read, right? I think it can be scary for people to sign up and make that commitment to reading, especially like a dense piece of work like this particular book was.
Right. And so I think two things about that. One is we always have a resistance, right? If it's something that means something to us and it's going to push us or force us into change, then there's a resistance to doing that. But I also think that you're exactly right. Like the commitment of, this is not a small book. There's a lot to it. I think it's over 400 pages. So it's not a small commitment, but you're right. There's no exam at the end. Read the table of contents, listen to the chapters that you can. You and I both admitted to each other that while the book is in front of us, we both listen to it because that's where we have time to do that. I have a 20-minute commute each day. And so that's where a lot of that work gets done for me. I don't have time necessarily to sit and read. But I also love books. I love the smell of books. I love to feel them. So often when I listen to a book, I'll still purchase it because I just want the physical copy of it. But I think then back to that fear of, or resistance, when you are talking about a book that's called The Body Keeps the Score, and then the subheading is Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma. The word trauma is super trendy right now. Everybody's talking about how do we be trauma informed, trauma sensitive, and it's relevant, right? Like, this is the world that we live in right now. There are a lot of things that people are dealing with. There are triggers. There are things that we should be aware of. But as the person that's holding trauma, we have to figure out how to manage those things. It is not the world's responsibility to manage the triggers for us. It is our responsibility to find regulation and manage those triggers. And I think that's exactly what this book is all about. And so why don't you tell me, like, what is your take on the book? Why is this important work? Why should we be thinking about and being willing to lean into this kind of work?
Yeah, the reason I chose this book in particular was inspired mostly by my work with young people and what we're seeing, young people, college students present with, what really would be a slate of capital T trauma experiences before they're 18 years old. And that can range a whole gamut of things, knowing that trauma can be defined as different things to different people, knowing that two people can experience the same event and one has a trauma response and one does not, right? We know all of those things. Neuroscience tells us all of those things. But what this book in particular looks at is how trauma shows up in our body, how it impacts the way we move through our lives, whether or not it's in our brain as we're doing so. And it really showed us the way that a traumatic event can seep into every part of a person's identity and how they show up in the world and how they engage with others. And and I guess we as space holders, whether that's in higher education or in a yoga studio setting, while you're right, the person with the trauma needs to be prepared to manage their triggers. I would love to be part of making a world like just a little bit more compassionate
Oh,
to hold and show up for those people.
100%.
Like just 10% more compassionate toward people who are showing up, and just needing a little extra time, space, whatever that might look like.
Absolutely. I absolutely 100% agree with that. There's no call for just shoving people into the world and making it more challenging than it needs to be. Because we both work in higher ed, we see a lot of those, you're right, the capital T's. And then we see a lot of the small T's too, where there's almost this, because I've had a couple of experiences over the last week or two where parents are getting involved and they're informing me that their child is not doing these things. Well, except their child needs to do those things in order to engage in the world and move through the world in a way that's successful. And I'm not saying we need to shove them into an experience that's going to be absolutely miserable. I'm saying we have to figure out how to do this in a way that's going to be successful for them so that they can move forward in a way that is going to be appropriate. And I want to say the word successful again, but really, like, if they want to be employable, if they want to do those things, we have to figure out how to do that. It's hard. It's really hard. So I think too, one of the things you said is that the trauma lives in the body. And I think that's one of the premises of this book and a lot of the research that is done. If you look at the table of contents, the first 2 or 3 parts, the first 3 parts of this, which are like about 150 pages, are really just about his research and the stories that he's telling of people that he has worked with and how it is showing up in their body. And so for so many of these people, they are either unidentified trauma. So in some cases, they have shoved it to the back of their mind and they're not even recognizing. There was one story in particular that I heard him talking about where they were sort of in a group therapy session and someone was telling a story about when they had been sexually molested as a child, and another woman who he knew that had happened to and thought that they were both on the same page had not recognized that that's what happened to her. And so in the circle, she was like, I think that happened to me. And he is shocked that she had not put this together. And so my whole point to that is like, you haven't even identified what is that trauma that you have experienced. You've sort of buried that. And so that obviously leads us to this. It's not only unidentified, it's unresolved. So your mind might not be recognizing what has happened to you or what you have been dealing with your entire life, but your body knows, and that is showing up in things like physical symptoms. So maybe you have anxiety or depression or some sort of reaction like PTSD or digestive issues or back pain or other chronic pain there. It's showing up in a way and manifesting itself in a way that you could go to all of the doctors in the world and they're never going to be able to identify what is the cause, because the root cause is something that you have yet to resolve, that has been imprinted. That's one of my favorite words that he uses, that has been imprinted onto your body, and you have to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, it was really fascinating to also hear about like autoimmune diseases and chronic illness and these things, these diagnoses that people get that, from what I've heard people describe, like don't always feel like that's the right thing, or is that really what's going on? And that's kind of where they're lumped and where they fall into. And then learning that there's a trauma component there, or that there might be, and there might be some connection. It also really just makes me wonder about how our current healthcare system is really set up to take care of the whole person. And I have had some excellent doctors, and I can tell you those appointments are very quick, and we do not get into all the things, right? Sometimes it's amazing what they fail to ask or mention or talk about, right? Even if you just look at, when's the last time you went to a physical and they talked about nutrition at all and asked what you were eating and those pieces. So if our current healthcare system, which of course, like there's huge expertise and research and knowledge in Western medicine, but if that isn't set up systemically right now to look at and hold space for the whole person, what are the other modalities that can connect those dots? And whether that's embodiment practices, movement practices, somatic practices, breathing, yoga, all of those things, how do they help support this person, the whole person, through the exploration, talk therapy, all of those pieces, medication, right? Like, how do we connect all of it?
Right. Because isn't that the challenge? I think you just sort of hit it right on the head. That's the challenge. You get these pieces that are not connected. And so I don't know if talk therapy is the thing that I need. I don't know if a somatic practice is the thing I need. I don't know if a medical doctor is the thing I need. I don't know if a holistic doctor is the thing that I need. And they're not connected and they're not talking to one another. And so how can we even consider figuring out what is the way to solve this problem if they're not connecting with one another?
Yeah, and not to get like even more existential here, but who are the folks who are most traumatized? And what are the barriers to care, right? Like all of these things and all these practices we just named, right? Like they all cost money and they all take time and they all require specialists in your area with transportation. Like, man, there are just layers here about getting people access to the care that they need. And so, I mean, bringing it back to the book though, I'm not saying that reading the book will heal you, right? I wish
You're done. We're done.
You've done it. But man, like what a cool concept that a book or a book club or a free book club could provide access to a conversation that someone might have not had access to otherwise.
Right.
Because
cool. Doesn't it all come down to this? So this sort of takes me down a couple of paths. One would be connection is information. Connection is about understanding. You went through something similar? Great. Tell me what you did. That thing might not work for me, or at least if you did 5 things, maybe 4 of them don't work, but one does, or you know somebody else that has something that might help, or somebody that I could go to that might be the thing. So sometimes it's really just about that connection and learning from one another and being willing to hear and be open to one another. And then I had a second path that I was going to go down on that, and I totally forget what it was. I'll remember it at some point. But I think, I know where it was. So then the other side of this is also in the book, the whole section, because you made the comment that this one book is not going to solve the world's problems. And I think that you're right, but I do think that there's something too about self-empowerment. And so the whole section 5 of this book, part 5, is about paths to recovery. It's not about taking this one thing and this one thing being the end all be all, but it's about how do you take several things and then how do you empower yourself to move through those? Because that's what it comes down to when you're talking back to that conversation of like, I don't have connectedness between these things. When I am empowered to figure out how they fit together and I'm empowered to find the knowledge, even though systems make that very challenging, I then have the ability to move through that. And so I think then when we're looking at some of these practices like breathing, yoga, qigong, meditation, whatever it is, and sometimes it's just walking, right? Like it doesn't have to be this big intimidating thing. It could just be walking and talking. And so when you can figure out then how to use those things, you get to make improvements in your life in a way that are really positive for you.
Do you want to share a little bit more about how you hold space for people with big T trauma, little T trauma in between, or that are just looking for a soft place to land and support in their journey?
I think we both can do that. So for sure. So it depends on what world I'm in right now and when I'm working through those things. So whether it's in higher ed, whether I'm teaching a class, whether I'm working with a client, there are a couple of things we have to do. Number one is you're never telling somebody how they should feel. You are never telling somebody how they should be reacting, what you should be doing in terms of what they're experiencing, because you said it earlier. 2 people can have the same exact experience and their perception of that experience is incredibly different. I know that I've shared some of the things that I do within higher ed, and one of them is helping students move through sexual misconduct issues. And so I have had several instances this year where 2 students have come together. They are in a relationship. They have had sex. And the girl, typically it's been the girl this year, it's not always, but in these couple of cases, the female comes and says, I did not want to have sex with him. This was not the experience that I wanted to not have sex with him. And so I'm asking questions. Did you tell him that you did not want to? Nope. I was afraid to tell him that I did not want to. Okay. So then when I'm talking with the gentleman, his perception was completely different. He thought they were on the same page. He thought that they were moving in the same direction and that they were both experiencing something that was very positive. And so, here is this experience where this was traumatizing and awful for her in this case. And he thought that it was just another step in their relationship. And so did either of them do something wrong? Sure. With an absence of a yes or the absence of a no does not equal a yes. And so somebody in this case has to learn how to ask those questions and make sure that the response is what they were looking for. Was she wrong for not saying no? Not necessarily. If you didn't say yes, then you are having an experience. And so helping both sides of that conversation navigate that is so challenging because they are both now going through something very awful. And they both have a perception of what happened and now what that has landed and how that could impact them. The outcome of that in the long term could be absolutely awful for both of them just because we were not clear on what we were looking for. And so all of that to say, like, holding space is so important. And it's again not about letting people know what they should be doing or what they should be feeling. It's about asking the questions that help them understand what they want their next steps to be, empowering them to make sure that they understand. And sometimes just acknowledging I'm in this situation is enough for right now. You don't have to fix it, which is hard for me because I'm a fixer. And so it's a constant retraining for me to not go fix it for them, but just to know it's okay that you experienced this. And that's all we needed to do for right now. And you get to set the pace, you get to set the steps, you get to decide what we're going to do next. And just making sure that everybody is comfortable through that process can be incredibly challenging and incredibly difficult. And then sometimes they're not getting the answers and the outcomes that they were looking for. And so then we're re-traumatizing because we're not getting through some of those processes. And we just have to continue to do that. So that's like current world sorts of stuff. When I'm working with clients, these are typically women who are 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. And so more often than not, we're talking about traumas that we're just starting to uncover and figure out. And I am not a therapist, I'm not their counselor, but we can work through some of those things up to a certain point at least. We can acknowledge that they're happening. We can work on some of what I would call my hippie woo ways of sort of surrendering to those things, releasing them, letting them go so that you can create the life that you're hoping to, or at least more closely aligned to the world that you're looking at or wanting to have. And so it's the same sort of thing though, is okay, so you experienced that as a child. Yep, that sure sounds like that was a thing. This is what you have to go do. That's not how we're going to do that. And so sometimes that might look like we're just going to talk about it, or sometimes it might look like that's some Reiki. Sometimes that might be some chakra clearing. Sometimes that might be some journaling. It might be some qigong. And like, there's so many things and so many ways that we can address it without forcing it on people or pushing them so far outside of their comfort zone that we're re-traumatizing them. And so I think that was a great question. And I just went down this huge tangent with it, even though I'm interviewing you.
Sorry.
That's amazing.
I like the opportunity to hear you talk about your work and what you do. And
so I love that. But I would also say to you, because you are doing very similar work in terms of higher ed, but also in terms of the yoga space, because I've had these experiences with some sort of somatic practice. Maybe it's a breath work or a meditation or visualization. It could be any sorts of things where we hit on something without knowing that we were about to hit on something. And so maybe a meditation or an exercise that I have led someone through means that it brought something up in a way that no one in that space was expecting. And so how do you move through that is just by supporting them, right? Or just, do you want to talk about it? You don't have to talk about it, but if you want to, I'm happy to do that. Or do you just want to breathe through it? Do you want to just sort of let it go? Do you want to just acknowledge that this happened for today, and then we move on and let it go for right now, and we come back to it another time? And so that's so fascinating to watch. And also, like, I'm not sure what is the word that I'm looking for right now. A blessing, like it's so I just feel so just blessed, I think is the word I want to use, that somebody would allow me to go through that with them and to experience that with them and help them sort of navigate what is the process and the steps through that, because that's vulnerable and that is hard. And it is not a place I like to be for myself. And so for someone else to let me in with them is just that I feel very just grateful that they'll allow me to work through that with them when that happens. Yeah.
Yeah,
Have you
that
had
truly
this?
is right. Such a
Right.
privilege as a practitioner
Privilege. What a
when
great word.
someone shares like their most vulnerable part with you. And then maybe they even find in that like, huh, I can share it again. Like,
Right. You've
I
opened
told
the
Becca
door.
and I didn't,
Mhm.
my world didn't crumble.
Right.
Yeah, that is, and that's one of the things that I get to do in the higher ed space. I really work with students through the college admissions process. And so I'm working with students who are trying to decide what to disclose or not to disclose on a process that is objective, but also quite subjective. And how much should they share or how much should they withhold of their story? And they're these young people trying to wrestle with what they want me to know and how they want me
Mhm.
to get to know them when all I get to read is, some pieces of paper. Um, and yeah, supporting them and be able to guide them in some of that decision making. And then you're right, the empowerment piece, like how can they
Mhm.
choose to frame that story? How can they choose to share that story in a way that feels like authentic and good and not like some kind of trauma dumping or oversharing or taking away from all the other elements of them, which I find students sometimes fear, right? If this one big thing that has happened to them becomes their whole story, but they have all this
Mhm.
other really amazing stuff. Um,
Right.
but yeah, students, people, anyone choosing to share their story with you, with me, with anyone, like what a privilege to be like the recipient and the keeper and like the
Mhm.
listener of that story.
Yeah. But you also said something else there that really resonated with me, and that's like the empowerment that comes from the first time that they share that message. And your reaction to that is so important, because if you
Yeah.
are like, "Oh my gosh, that's the most terrible thing I've ever heard," well, then they're not going to want to talk about that again, right? Like, or if you
Right.
like, "Oh, that probably," or "That happened to me," or "That didn't," or "Mine was worse," or
Yeah.
I think people sometimes, you see this too in grief, that you just don't know what to say, and so something really awkward or inappropriate comes out, and so it doesn't land well for the person, and then it pushes them back further. But if you handle that with a little bit of grace and just a little bit of support, your words don't have to be perfect, but if you can just give them a little support, maybe a hug if that's what they're looking for, it opens the door for them to be able to have that conversation again and to realize that this is not the end of the world and I can now continue to work through this. I think is really important. I feel like there was a quote in the book that I had underlined that, yeah, I think this sort of fits here. So this is in part of the recovery, and it's how you start to move through the recovery. And he says the emotional and physical sensations that were imprinted during the trauma are experienced not as memories, but as disruptive physical reactions in the present. And so I just like that really resonated with me. How does that sit for you?
Yeah. The first thing that came to mind is our reactivity.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we're triggered and we want to snap at our partner or our toddler or whomever, or like an email in our inbox just like sends
Oh,
us over the edge. But like
yep.
if I received it yesterday, it would have been fine. Like so
Right.
sometimes it's like needing to really, and you were talking earlier with just like with listening to people's stories, like just this power in the pause and in the silence and like being able to step back out of your body for a second to get this
Mm-hmm.
like 1,000-foot view. um yeah, like what's happening here? Why am I feeling rage at like the dishwasher,
Right.
right? Like what's happening? Like really, really pausing to like ask yourself some questions and like sit with that and be like, well, I skipped lunch, whatever, just like putting together all the pieces. Um, so that's what came to mind for me is like this like reactivity or like volatility in our bodies. You're right. It's not like a memory. I wasn't like, oh, I remember,
Mm-hmm.
whatever happened, when I was
Right.
6 or whatever. But
Right.
yeah, it's like what led me to this moment where this topic presented in this way with this tone in this moment is too much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And whether you recognize it or not, it's happening. And so I think that like there's a story that I've told a couple of times on this podcast that when I was 6, my grandmother made a really nasty remark about me. Like it was just mean. She was never a warm and fuzzy kind of lady. She's nice enough and she's really funny, but she was in a mood and she made a comment. And I remember very clearly her making that comment. And that resonated and like it imprinted. That is the word for sure. It imprinted. And I bet I was in my 40s before I was able to face that and recognize that what she said about me is not my truth. It does not need to be my truth. And over the next couple of weeks, which will be the first couple of weeks before this podcast launches, I'm talking a lot about acknowledgement and rewriting your story and the fact that you get to rewrite your story. That narrative that has been created in your mind does not have to stay. You get to choose what it is and how you move forward with that. And I feel like that's what this statement is saying, that this is a memory that's just held in your body, but you get to choose how you use that moving forward. I say that like that's a really easy thing to do. And you just, that's a quick decision and you just turn that on or off. There's often a lot of work that comes along with that you have to do in order to be able to do that. But it's still your choice to want to or start to work through that in that way.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that with myself and with listeners.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good reminder though, that like the thing that like bounces around in our brains and turns into this like limiting belief or this thing that we hold on to that we like do believe about ourselves, like could be a comment that was like a throwaway comment, right? Like
it was nothing.
This major
and if I said to her that
situation.
was the comment that you made to me, she would not remember that she made that comment. It was offhand and when she was in a mood, like it didn't mean anything to her, but for me it was there for a very long time. Think about that. Think about the impact that you have on people. I think for me, I struggle with that a little bit. Like my words matter, my reactions matter. I have to be very careful in how I say or do, and I think that's
there's a lot of there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
responsibility there. And I do think though that people are talking about trauma so much more, and like they are talking about mental health so much more, and they're talking about all these things so much more, that like maybe like incrementally we're creating this either culture or society of people that is a little bit more thoughtful about what they say, or when they inadvertently say the thing or do the thing that they were like, ooh, maybe shouldn't have done that. Maybe we're equipping ourselves with the skills to then go like and do the repair and say like, ooh, I said something yesterday and like, that wasn't nice. I shouldn't have said it that way, or whatever.
Oh, we do it, don't we?
You can't do takesies backsies, but
but you can try to do better next time.
Yeah, and try to repair versus however many years later. Maybe we're creating a culture of people that are a little bit more, whether it's self-aware or mindful or whatever that is.
All of those words, I'll take them all. A little bit of emotional intelligence for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So let me ask you this question. In your practice specifically, is there, because I think that regulation in terms of nervous system and autonomic nervous system, all those things are something that's really important in this work. And so when we are starting to feel ourselves move into whether it's stress or anxiety or tension of some sort, is there any one practice in particular that you find to be helpful to sort of get yourself self-regulated? Yourself, or you would recommend to somebody else?
All of it. All of it. So for me, movement has always been like the practice. Moving my body intuitively in ways that feel good. I love my yoga practice. I like lifting heavy weight and that feels empowering.
Yeah.
I should do it more. It's good for you.
Same.
I am a fair weather runner, a seasonal runner every now and then, a brisk fall day. And all of a sudden I'm like out there with a jogging stroller. I'm like, who does she think she is? But I've seen this TikTok or reel, on my feed a couple times that says something like, like if you're working out, but you're not like training with a plan. And like, so my degree is in exercise physiology. So like I know about training with a plan.
I forgot that, right?
Prescriptions. Like
Right.
I understand, like, you need to use it to lose it. Like, I know all of those, like, physiological, how we make muscles grow, how we, like, I know how to do it. But like, there's something really joyful in like just moving for the sake of moving, and like moving with no intention, and moving because it feels good, and like throwing out the intention of like wanting to honestly to look different, and then just leaning into wanting to feel different, and then choosing the movement that, you know, makes you feel that. So I've said for a long time, right? Like, if you are like running on the treadmill and miserable, or like climbing on the stairmaster and miserable, like I urge you to stop that. Like, that sounds like a terrible way to spend your time. And like,
And it's
find
not
a
helping your
movement.
mindset, right? Like that's not the
Gosh,
way to do that.
no. That sounds like some sort of purgatory on the Stairmaster. But, you know, just moving in ways that, that bring you joy. With movement, your body is present in theory, right? Or your mind is, you're present because you're thinking about the thing that you're doing, right? Like one foot in front of the other, or whatever that is. Um, I love an affirmation. I love like whether it's an affirmation card, or I love a reframing, or I love I am safe. Like, I love one of those, just reminding myself, like, oh, you know, another good book, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. Have you read that one?
Oh, I have not. I will
So
though.
good. So good. But it's about how our physiological response is as if we're a zebra being chased by a lion, right? Like, our heart rate increases, our respiratory rate increases, all the things happen, our pupils dilate, we're like ready for battle. And like, all it was an email, you know? So,
Right.
it is just like the I am safe, like, cause it, like, okay, like truly, like, I am safe. I am in my office, you know, whatever it is. Yeah, like grounding ourselves in safety can also feel really good.
Just grounding in general makes me very happy.
Yeah.
Finding your center. We spend a lot of time centering. Absolutely. I also think there's something about movement, and I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's just breath work. I don't care if it's some kind of somatic practice, or if it's just moving your body. That's what moves you out of this state of, I'm trying to survive. So maybe that's a fight, flight, or freeze, or, you know, I'm just in this high stressed level of trying to survive. And that's how you start moving into healing whatever it is that you need to try to work through. So I think that that's just really important. I love that. I think that's also a really good segue to say that we are going to have a little something coming up here that I think is going to be super fun. And so we, in Becca's studio, I am going to be there on May 16th from 6 to 7:30 on a Friday evening. How could you possibly find a better way to spend a Friday evening than with me? And it is a workshop that is called Panic to Peace, and it is a somatic approach to managing anxiety. And so this is exactly the kind of work that we are going to be doing in that workshop. And I think that it should be I think it'll be fun. I don't do anything that's not fun. Even if we're crying for a hot minute while we work through something, we're going to end up having a little fun while we do it. But I think that if you come with an open mind and willing to put some effort into it and some willingness there, you can identify some things that are happening, and we can figure out some strategies to work through that. Not to mention, we'll do some somatic practices while we're there. And so that's always a really good time.
Yeah, we are thrilled to have you and introduce you to our community. I love that you wear so many hats as a practitioner, and you like dabble in a little bit of this and a little bit of this and a little bit of this. It's just different tools in your tool bag, depending on the day or the person you're working with. And so I think it's going to be a really dynamic workshop.
Yeah, me too.
And yeah, we're excited to have you.
Thanks. I'm really looking forward to it. I think that you just said it. I've got so many modalities under my belt, but it's not a matter of, you know, when you're working with a person, it's not this one thing fits. It's this is the one fix for everybody. Right. It's nothing is that generalized, and it's just a matter of, what are you going through? What are you open to? How do you want to work through this? And this is the thing I think is going to work for you. So let's give it a shot. If that doesn't work, we try something different. It's okay. I really love that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. So anything else that you can think of that you want to share, or anything else that is sitting on your mind before we wrap this up?
Oh gosh. No, I don't think so.
No pressure.
Go read a book. Go read a book.
Go read any book. So we've named 2.
Go read any book. We'd love to talk to you about it. Go read any book and talk to someone about it. Yeah.
I love it. I love that idea. Just go talk about it. Take the pressure off. This isn't about passing an exam. This is about learning just a little something new. Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it. This was a super fun conversation. And I think we both got a little bit of affirmation out of what we learned from the book, what we were able to put into practice, and how we bring it to the rest of the world.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.